This from the New York Times. After plummeting, the virus soars back in the Midwest. So what we are experiencing now is a resurgence of COVID-19, and I'd just like to read a little bit from this article just to, highlight what's going on. States like Missouri, Illinois, and Wisconsin are riding a frustrating seesaw during the pandemic, with new coronavirus cases rising again after apparent progress. So this is an August 1st article in the New York Times, and it says, first, the Pacific Northwest and the Northeast were hit hardest as the coronavirus tore through the nation. Then it surged across the South. Now the virus is again picking up dangerous speed in much of the Midwest and in states from Mississippi to Florida to California that thought they had already seen the worst of it. As the United States rides what amounts to a second wave of cases, with daily new infections leveling off at an alarming higher mark, there is a deepening national sense that the progress made in fighting the pandemic is coming undone and no patch of America is safe. In Missouri, Wisconsin, and Illinois, distressed government officials are retightening restrictions on residents and businesses and sounding warnings about a surge in coronavirus-related hospitalizations. In the South and the West, several states are reporting their highest levels of new coronavirus cases, with outbreaks overwhelming urban and rural areas alike. Across the country, communities including Snohomish County, Washington, Jackson, Mississippi, Snohomish County, Washington, Jackson, Mississippi, and Baton Rouge, Louisiana, have seen coronavirus numbers fall and then shoot back up, not unlike the two ends of a seesaw. Okay. In Illinois, Governor Pritzker, this is a millionaire jackass who bought the election. I donated and supported the candidate that was running against him. I believe that was okay. I'm blanking on who was running against him right now, but there was a Justice Democrat back candidate, I believe, running against him. But this, millionaire just bought the election, so screw him. But whatever. In Illinois, Governor J.B. Pritzker sounded an unusually somber note this past week as he delivered a warning that reverberated across the state. Even though Illinoisans had battled an early flood of coronavirus infections and then managed to reduce the virus's spread, their successes were fleeting. As of Thursday, the state was averaging more than 1,400 cases a day, up from about 800 at the start of July. So here we are in the midst of all this, as folks like Stephen Mnuchin are out there saying that, these $600 payments were only necessary during emergency. Well, here we have a clear resurgence of coronavirus cases in the US, who was already leading the charge on these. I mean, I think Brazil passed us recently, but we are up there, top 5, easily, steady and just holding steady in there, top 3 probably really cases. We have the US has 5% of the world's population, but over 25% of the world's COVID-19 cases and deaths. So keep that in mind. We also do that with incarceration too. 5% of the world's population, 25% of the world's incarcerated. So we're number 1. But this is important. This is important because it just shows that we're not out of this thing yet. And we already knew it was going to have a resurgence in the fall, but this resurgence right now is a resurgence due to a premature reopening. We all knew that the resources hadn't been provided to support this. Personal protective equipment was still lacking in many hospitals even, but across the board for, just folks that need it in general. And in a lot of states, hospital capacities were still very high. In Texas, they've gone beyond capacity, and the Texas State Board, I forget, their health board issued guidelines that for how to choose which patients they should send home with COVID-19 to go die at home. So that's where we are based on, age and health risk. We're now having to decide who dies because we don't have enough ventilators and hospital beds to care for all of these people, at least in Texas right now. So this is what we're facing. And again, with this resurgence is almost directly tied to this forced reopening, a premature reopening. Because why? People are desperate and they're begging to go back to work, not because they really want to go back to work because work is unsafe still, but because they are desperate to pay bills and they think work is the only way. And so people are rushing back to work when we're not ready for that, when we don't have the equipment in the virus and we don't have the treatment for COVID-19 yet. And so it's still dangerous and we're putting people's lives at risk. And we're talking about opening up schools when another study just recently came out that said that children actually spread coronavirus more efficiently than adults do. So maybe they're not dying from it necessarily, and children are dying from it. There have been cases of 5-year-olds. It was the youngest one I've heard of, but I know I'm sure there are even younger cases dying from COVID-19. So this, this idea that, oh, this only harms older people, and so we as young people or millennials or whoever we are, we can go out there. I got people that were like thinking about, taking trips to Florida in the midst of like Florida's like Florida at their worst, and people are like thinking about traveling from Massachusetts to Florida in the midst of that. Like, people can be, somewhat careless sometimes, and not thinking about, what this means. Again, maybe we're safe, but maybe we spread it to somebody who's more susceptible to this or immunocompromised. And so we have to be thoughtful of not just ourselves, but our community. Are we endangering our community by, trying to go out to restaurants and take masks off? I was at I went to a cheesecake factory recently just to pick up a takeout order. And the way that they had this thing structured was like, I took a picture. There were like 40 people packed into this tiny area. They had people that were picking up deliveries, telling them to come into the building, and pick up their food. And that same area where you're picking up your food is where, everybody has to funnel through to get, the people that are coming in to be seated. And I mean, people are just spaced with one table separating them with their masks off. The whole restaurant, a huge restaurant, enclosed space full of people, masks off, and you're packed into the space just to pick up food. The old system, they were, dropping it off outside. You would just drive up your car, pull into a spot, and they would drive it out there. Small business I've seen with much better practices. I've seen small businesses like small pizza shops, local pizza shop. I went and like picked up a slice of pizza, and they told me like, wait outside for the slice. And I was like, yes, absolutely. That sounds great and safe. And I'm cool with that. I felt very nervous and afraid. I mean, I was like messaging my girlfriend like, this is crazy, like, what are they doing? Like, it was making me anxious, so anxious, like being in this space with all these people. I had not been that close to that many people since this pandemic started, and it was just like, it was crazy making kind of stuff. And so I was just, if people are because of what they're being told by the government and the loosening of restrictions, people are feeling more comfortable going out in public, even without masks, or wearing their mask with like the nose uncovered. Those are the ones I just want to but yeah, so just try to be considerate. People, wear masks if you can. Wear, whatever protective equipment you can. I wish I had some like gloves that fit me. I probably wear them to the stores and stuff, but like I can't even find like a pair of gloves, but like whatever. So all right, let's again, we just got to kind of speed through because I'm really in a crunch time. So I'm going to kind of keep pushing through, and I'll try to get to the comments at the end. Quick one from let's read a few more. Ben 2K says, I want Senate to work for minimum wage. Exactly. Maybe if I have a theory that we should tie the pay of the Congress to the minimum wage, make it some percentage, whatever, tie it to the minimum wage. And I guarantee you those folks will be raising that minimum wage to raise their own pay. So I think that's a great idea, Ben, tying their pay to the minimum wage, or forget pay. The troubling thing about paying the minimum wage is that then they're more susceptible to corruption, because if they can't survive, then they're going to be more likely to be corrupted. So I do believe in like making sure they're being paid a living wage, but a minimum wage should be a living wage. So yeah, I agree. But I do think we could give them, like, say, 2 times minimum wage or 4 times minimum wage, but tie it to the minimum wage. Another economist came up with another thing where you tie something else to the minimum wage. I don't know. I'll dig into that, but I think that's a good idea. Ben 2K says, they represent the people, then live like the people you represent. So damn true, man. These people are so out of touch. These Congress people are so out of touch with working class people. Thanato says, LOL, then maybe then they'll raise the minimum wage. Exactly. Yep, absolutely. Ben 2K says that's the idea. Ben 2K says, yeah, you, and I mean Trump fucked up COVID real bad. You don't have a second wave. You fucked up so bad. You're still in the first one. Yeah, right? Like, it's like, there is no second wave. This is still the first wave, and it's just like, and this wave is like a damn tsunami here. You can look at a graph. I saw a graph of like the EU cases versus US cases, and it's wild. Like, so many deaths were preventable, but because of our lack of response to this thing, in this underwhelming response to it, this is what we end up with. for now what is the second straight week, unemployment claims in the US have risen. This is after 4 months of steady decline in the numbers. There were from the peak. Now, these numbers are still larger than anything we've seen in history, but it was declining. It was at least slowly declining for the past 4 months. But in the past 2 weeks now, 2 weeks straight, we've seen an increase in those unemployment numbers. So this is from an article from CNBC and titled U.S. Weekly Jobless Claims Rise for a Second Straight Week, total 1.434 million people. That's 1.434 million people. They'll adjust this up to like 1.5 surely.